Dear ladies and gentlemen, our Tel Aviv 100 conference is a very local one by its definition, but it's my great honor and pleasure to have here with us one of the most global, truly global CEOs in Israel, Mr. Stefan Bורגוס. Originally from Germany, your career took you to China, to the United States, to Switzerland, and now to Israel. So tell us, how are you handling your first summer? Any regrets yet?
Still waiting for the heat, actually. It's, that's why I take a jacket. Maybe I'm assimilated already. No, great country. I love it. You know, about 5 months when I came home from a long trip through Asia on the plane, about an hour and a half before we landed, I woke up and looked on the watch and said, oh, another hour and a half and I'm home. And then I said, all right, I've arrived in Israel.
You called it home.
Yeah.
So after being here for 1 year, and you've been to Israel before you took your office, how is your impression now about Israel is different? And we have to mention that you met a couple of Israeli government officials during this year.
Yeah, I met a lot of people, many people. You know, I fell in love with Israel in 2007 because I came on a very intensive personal trip before doing actually some very serious business here with companies, some of them which have presented here today. And I fell in love with Israel at that time. And then when the opportunity came in the spring of last year to come here, I jumped immediately. Because there's this, somehow I have this emotional connection which I cannot explain. Now that I'm here almost a year, the sentiment is still exactly the same. The emotions are the same, the feeling is the same, my stomach is still the same. But of course the picture is much more differentiated. And maybe the thing I'm the most surprised about, and maybe also concerned about, is the amount of regulation and the way this regulation is handled and managed. And
Elaborate, please.
And I'm nervous about this because this I think is a problem for the country if we can't fix it together. What am I saying? What do I mean by this? I think we don't have a problem at all with tough regulation. This is not an issue. I've lived in countries like Switzerland and US where regulations are the toughest in the world. But what we have a problem with is the unpredictability of regulatory change when it changes erratically without talking about it. The second thing we have a problem about is if regulators, while we implement, can't make decisions so that the process drags on for a long time. This is a huge problem. And the third thing we have a problem with, and this is a current issue now, once we've reached an agreement with a regulator, which we sign and seal.
You mean the harvest?
Then we have to rely on it because we're dealing in industry. We're not a fast-moving segment of the economy. We deal with industry. We invest with a perspective of 30 years. And then when every 9 months fundamentals in our environment change, this hurts us.
So when you signed, before you came, the harvest agreement was signed and you thought that you will have some quiet period for certain years, and now it's open again. It's an open issue again.
Well, it wasn't the harvest agreement. It was an entire package of government take out of natural resources, new concession, basically the entire concession contract that that ICL bought from the government at the end of the 90s was completely renegotiated. This was a 2-year process. You can debate whether this is too long or not, but it was a 2-year negotiation process with huge amounts of data delivered. We signed this in June 2012, and not 9 months later, this is completely reopened again.
So
and this is a disaster.
So your calculations were based on government take of how much?
Of about 41% currently of profits, going up to over 50% as per the agreement, and one other significant legal change last year also.
So this brings us actually to the inevitable topic which I think is of interest for all the people here inside, and it's your stock. It's one of the favorites for Israeli investors as well as for foreign ones, and we saw it crashing almost 20% since the beginning of the year. Who is to blame? Is it the regulation, the uncertainty, or maybe the markets did want the potash merger and it's to blame?
You know, it's very dangerous for a CEO to make specific comments about movements of the stock. So I'll say a few words anyway. This is Israel, you cannot say nothing. But let me do one thing. Our head of investor relations, who is a really passionate Israeli lady with quite a global view on the economy. She's in London since 2 days. And she wrote me this email this morning, actually. She says, Stefan, I'm meeting investors in London and Switzerland for the first time after the formation of the Sheshinsky Committee 2. The mood is the worst that I have seen in the past year. All the investors are very disappointed from the Israeli regulatory environment. They thought that after the salt harvest and royalty agreement that was signed a year ago, the government officially announced that for the time being the royalty issue is finished. We are now compared to third world countries who made changes to royalty structures and nationalization/socialist type governments. One shareholder asked me if the risk of nationalization and how active is the socialist discussion in Israel. This is live from, this morning from the investors in London who look at us. And that's the problem with our stock. The company's performance is good. We have a stronger first quarter than last year. We're going to have a pretty good year this year, on or slightly below last year's levels. So there's absolutely no reason why our stock should have gone down 25% when the whole sector went down maybe 4 or 5% because of specific things.
So how do you intend to address these issues? It's complicated issues, unexpected ones. What can you do?
We're lucky enough that we have a very strong and long-term oriented anchor shareholder who protects us against doing crazy things in cases like this, where in public companies sometimes you have to do crazy things to defend you. We don't need this because we have a 52% shareholder who looks 10 years from now.
You mean the Israeli corporation?
Israel corporation, managed by actually a really great industrialist. We can maybe talk about this later. The issue we have here is not an issue of ICL, at least not in the short term. The issue we have here is an Israeli issue. Because what happened? 20% decrease of the stock price, with more than almost 60% of ICL shares are held by Israeli pension funds, directly by ICL and through IC, Israel Corporation. This means a destruction of value in the pension funds of Israel of 9 billion shekels. 9 billion shekels. This is 2 times the amount of the tax increases in 2013 that the social protests are protesting against. 2 times the amount was destroyed by, let me say, 2 careless comments.
Made by?
Made by different people, talking about takeover defense, talking about government take, not paying enough. When a company like ICL, we're the biggest taxpayer in Israel. There's no company who pays more tax and royalties in the entire country. What my employees tell me in Routem, in Zdom, in Beersheva, in Neot Chovav, in Haifa, when I go and talk to them, they say, Stefan, why do the newspapers in Israel write that we don't contribute? It's not true, we contribute so much. And it's true, we don't contribute. We contribute more than any company in Israel. What we should talk about is this enough? That's a very fair question. And what are the consequences if we take more now versus if we take more or less as a country from these natural resources? But this is a discussion to be held quietly and with the facts on the table and not through the public media all the time, because so much is wrong.
Do you meet politicians on a regular basis?
I try to meet with politicians on a regular basis. I must say this is one of the great things about this country. Politicians usually are very open. Almost all of them are ready to meet, and then you can have frank discussions. Some of them are nervous if they meet with industrial people, and then once we talk, they see that we all have 2 legs and 2 arms, and we're quite normal. So this works, but many don't understand the context. And all we should do, I think, as a country is sit together, put the different perspectives on the table. Of course, we can double the taxes on ICL again. Then what do we have to do as management? We have to cut jobs, we have to squeeze our investments, we have to put our money elsewhere because it becomes less and less profitable. So it's like a sausage, you squeeze on one end and then it goes up on the other. You can only take the money once, of course.
And do you think that being a part of an Israeli corporation hurts you in public opinion eyes? And when you mentioned that you meet politicians, they're nervous about the fact they are meeting you?
I would say it's like with kids, with teenagers. I have a few teenagers at home. The more secure they are, the less of a problem they have, and if they're insecure, then they have a problem with this. So in general, it hurts us in some cases image-wise, in other cases it benefits us actually. Depends on where we go. Outside the country, we are greatly admired for the ownership structure that we have because it gives us the chance to develop the company long term.
Okay, so if I may take you 1 year ago again, what did you think your main issues will be as a CEO of ICL? I guess it was different from what you see now.
Okay, some issues are maybe different, but the general trend are not different. You know, thankfully, I don't have to spend more time than necessary on these kinds of issues because we have a great team in Israel who handles this. So I can spend my time on making the company international. We have a lot of opportunities around the world to grow. We're very quietly and in a focused way preparing this. We will announce our strategy in August, a little bit more in detail. There's great energy now in the company that a lot of people drive into the future. So this was what I expected, and this is what actually I'm spending most of my time on. The second thing is globalize the company, connect all the pieces together more than they are. Even inside Israel, we're not connected enough.
Do you think it's essential for ICL's management to stay in Israel, or it can be run from China or the US or anywhere?
You know, the company will survive even if the management is not here. But it would be hurting us in the midterm because our DNA, the DNA of this company has been created here and is greatly influenced from here. You know, this DNA, this Israeli DNA, which is a combination out of friendliness, warmth, directness, and improvisation talent and determination. These 4 pieces. If I go on our site in the United States, people they have something from that. They have this. You can smell it there. They are more direct and to the point than Americans usually are. And I think it would be a real big shame to lose this, and that's why headquarters should stay here.
And just to wrap it up, and on the same note, where do you see yourself in 5, say 7 years from now?
Paying off my mortgage from my apartment in Tel Aviv.
My condolences for mortgage. Thank you very much, Stefan. I would like to wish you good luck and success. And I think that following Shishinsky too, your success will be our success as Israeli citizen.
It's our pension plans, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.